The sun was setting on the horizon as the passengers on the luxury cruise ship, the Mariner, settled down for dinner. Little did they know that their idyllic vacation was about to turn into a nightmare. As the night went on, a fierce storm hit, and the ship was tossed around in the rough waters. The engines failed, and the ship began to drift towards an unknown island. In the morning, the passengers awoke to find themselves stranded on a deserted island, with no means of communication or rescue. Panic set in as they realized they were alone and isolated. As the group explored the island, they discovered that it was inhabited by a tribe of cannibals. Travelers were horrified at the realization that they were not alone on the island, and worse yet, they were being hunted by the cannibals. The group quickly realized that they needed to find a way off the island before it was too late. But they were in for a rude awakening as they found themselves being stalked by the cannibals at every turn. As the days went on, the group faced many challenges. They had to find food and shelter while avoiding the traps set by the cannibals. They found themselves constantly on the move, never staying in one place for too long. The group was also plagued by internal strife, as some members of the group began to lose hope and give up, but others refused to give up, and they banded together to fight for their survival. The group eventually stumbled upon a small boat, and they saw it as their chance to escape the island. However, they soon realized that the cannibals had destroyed the boat's engine, leaving them stranded once again. With their options dwindling, the group realized that they needed to take drastic measures to survive. They began to fortify a section of the island, building traps and barricades to protect themselves from the cannibals. But their efforts were in vain, as the cannibals continued to attack them relentlessly. One by one, members of the group were captured and taken away to be eaten by the cannibals. As the group dwindled in numbers, they realized that they had to take one final stand against the cannibal. They gathered what weapons they could find and launched a surprise attack on the cannibal village. The battle was fierce, and the group suffered heavy losses, but in the end, they emerged victorious. The cannibals were defeated, and the remaining travelers were finally rescued by a passing ship. As they sailed away from the island, the remaining passengers looked back at the island, haunted by the memories of what had happened there. They knew that they had been lucky to survive, but they also knew that they would never forget the horrors they had faced on that forsaken island. The incident had left its mark on the survivors, and they knew that they would never take their lives for granted again. They had learned that the world was a dangerous place, and that they had to be prepared for anything that might come their way. In the end, the survivors realized that they had not only defeated the cannibals, but they had also conquered their own fears and weaknesses. They knew that they would never forget what they had been through, and that they would always be grateful for the second chance they had been given. The air was crisp and the leaves were turning orange as the group of friends began their backpacking trip in the remote wilderness. They were excited to escape the city and immerse themselves in nature. However, they were not prepared for what they would find deep in the forest. As the group hiked deeper into the woods, they became disoriented and lost. Their map was of no use, and they had no cell phone signal. As night fell, they stumbled upon an ancient burial ground, which they initially thought was a promising discovery. However, it was soon clear that this was no ordinary burial ground. As they explored the area, they noticed that the graves were marked with symbols that they didn't recognize. They also noticed an eerie silence and an unnatural stillness in the air. The atmosphere was unsettling and made them feel as though they were being watched. As they set up camp for the night, they heard strange noises and whispers, which they assumed were just the sounds of the wilderness. However, as the night went on, they realized that they were not alone. A vengeful spirit, awakened by their presence, began to torment the group. It would knock over their tents, cause sudden gusts of wind, and create ominous shadows. The group tried to ignore it, hoping that it would go away, but the spirit's attacks became more intense and terrifying as time went on. One by one, the group members began to disappear. They would be there 1 minute and gone the next, leaving no trace behind. The remaining friends became increasingly frightened and paranoid, and they began to turn on each other. As they tried to make their way out of the burial ground, the spirit intensified its attacks. It would appear in front of them, its eyes blazing with fury, and it would cause trees to fall in their path. They felt trapped and helpless. In their desperation, the group stumbled upon a cave that seemed to offer a way out. But as they entered the cave, they realized too late that they had walked into a trap. The cave was a burial chamber, and the spirit had led them there to claim them as its own. The group members were surrounded by the angry spirits of the dead. They had no weapons, and their only option was to fight with their bare hands. They were outnumbered and outmatched, and it seemed as though their fate was sealed. But then, one of the friends remembered a ritual that they had read about before. It was a ritual that was said to banish spirits from burial grounds. The group frantically searched for the ingredients and performed the ritual with all their might. To their surprise, it worked. The spirits disappeared into the air, and the group was left alone. Exhausted and traumatized, they stumbled out of the cave and into the daylight. As they made their way back to civilization, they knew that they had narrowly escaped death. They also knew that they had discovered something that should never have been disturbed. They made a pact to never speak of the experience again and to warn others to stay away from that cursed burial ground. The group members went their separate ways, but they all carried with them the memory of the vengeful spirit that had nearly claimed their lives. They knew that they would never forget that experience, and that it would forever be a cautionary tale of the dangers that lurk in the wilderness. It started with a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. The young woman, named Lily, would see shadows darting around when she was alone in her apartment. At first, she brushed it off as just her imagination, but as the weeks went on, the shadows grew more vivid and terrifying. Lily began to feel like she was being watched, and her dreams became increasingly vivid and gruesome. She would wake up sweating and shaking, convinced that something was lurking in the darkness of her room. As the hallucinations continued, Lily's fear grew, and she became convinced that she was losing her mind. But then, she started to connect the dots. The hallucinations all seemed to be connected to a dark secret from her past that she had long tried to forget. Years ago, Lily had been involved in a car accident that had taken the life of her best friend. She had always blamed herself for the accident and had tried to push the memories out of her mind. But now it seemed that the past was catching up to her in the form of these terrifying hallucinations. Lily began to research her symptoms and discovered that they could be a sign of a deeper psychological issue. She sought the help of a therapist, but as she delved deeper into her past, the hallucinations grew even more vivid and terrifying. The shadows that once lingered in the corners of her eye began to take on a physical form. They would materialize in front of her, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Lily could feel their breath on her face and hear their whispers in her ear. As Lily's fear grew, so did her desperation to uncover the truth about her past. She reached out to her old friends and family members who had been involved in the accident, hoping that they could help her understand what was happening to her. One by one, they revealed their own secrets about that fateful night, and Lily began to piece together the truth. She discovered that her friend's death had not been an accident at all. Someone had deliberately caused the crash, and Lily had been the intended target. Armed with this new knowledge, Lily confronted the person responsible for her friend's death. In a chilling confrontation, the truth was revealed. Lily's former best friend had been jealous of her success and had orchestrated the accident as a way to get revenge. As the truth came to light, the hallucinations began to fade, and Lily felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had faced her darkest fears and had emerged stronger for it. In the end, Lily realized that she had been running from her past for too long. She had been haunted by the memory of her friend's death, and it had taken a toll on her mental health. But by facing the truth head on, she had been able to break free of the grip of her hallucinations and move forward with her life.